One morning, early into my tenure as a community impact professional, I had a meeting with a nonprofit founder. I assumed we were meeting about the work she and her team were doing serving students, and I was expecting her to ask us for support. But about halfway into our meeting, the conversation took a surprising turn. "I've got to be honest with you, Keith," she said after an awkward pause. "I've been doing this work for more than a decade. I love serving these youth, but the day-to-day grind is exhausting. I'm burned out. I just want a normal job." And then she asked me if we were hiring. Fast forward to a meeting I had with a frontline associate in one of our companies. I thought we were meeting about volunteerism. And again, the conversation took a surprising turn. "Keith, I've been doing credentialing work for 20 years. I'm burned out. What I really want to do is work for a nonprofit organization that serves people in the community." Two professionals, both burned out and wanting what the other had. These two conversations lingered in my mind. What makes us believe the grass is greener elsewhere? Are certain jobs inherently more fulfilling and meaningful than others? And if so, are those jobs more closely tied to generosity? But there was one question that haunted and excited me the most. Could any job or task be made to be meaningful? What I discovered permanently changed the way I see and understand my perception of work. Welcome to Generosity at Work, a podcast that explores the ways in which generosity is at work in our workplaces and how it's at work in the world. I'm Keith Jennings, a community impact executive with Jackson Healthcare. In the last episode, we looked at the science of generosity, and we learned how being consistent is key to generosity's positive impact on our health and well-being. In this episode, we're going to move into the why behind generosity. We're going to dive into research that suggests that we need to stop believing some ideal job can bring purpose to our lives, and instead, we can bring purpose into the job we're doing right here, right now. In 1666, the Great Fire of London destroyed 1/3 of the city. One of the churches demolished in the fire was St. Paul's Cathedral. Renowned architect Sir Christopher Wren was put in charge of rebuilding the great church, as well as 52 other churches in the city. There's an old parable that goes something like this. One day, Sir Wren was out surveying the work on St. Paul's, and he came upon some bricklayers. He approached one of the workers and asked about his task. The man responded, "I'm laying bricks, sir." Sir Wren approached a second bricklayer and made the same inquiry. "I'm building a wall so I can feed my family," the man answered. When he engaged with the third bricklayer, the tradesman looked up and said, "Sir, I'm building a cathedral for the Almighty." 3 workers, each doing the exact same task, laying bricks, but each having a vastly different perspective about the meaning and purpose of their work. I opened this episode with a story of 2 professionals. One was a nonprofit leader, burned out and looking for renewed purpose through a normal job. The other was a frontline credentialing specialist looking for renewed purpose through a nonprofit job. The assumption both held was that meaning, purpose, and fulfillment are things external to ourselves. They're out there, and our job is to find it. But the bricklayer's parable suggests these things aren't job dependent, that in fact, any job or task can be made meaningful and purposeful. If this is true, and hint, hint, it is, then generosity isn't limited to certain types of people doing certain types of jobs. Generosity and the happiness, meaning, and purpose it creates is available to anyone doing any job, which means you and I can experience greater purpose and meaning in our work right now, today. But how? In my research to look for correlations between generosity and meaningfulness, I came upon the work of Dr. Blake Allan, Associate Professor and Program Director of Counseling Psychology at the University of Houston. Through his academic research, Dr. Allan has uncovered some powerful insights on what he calls task significance. I asked him to define task significance.
So task significance is believing that your work benefits other people or helps them in some way.
I don't want you to miss the depth and context underneath that seemingly simple definition. Task significance, when you and I can understand it enough to apply it to our work, is like a rocket booster that can carry us beyond the gravitational pull of seemingly boring, irrelevant, everyday tasks. I asked Dr. Allan to go deeper.
So task significance is different from that kind of like felt sense that my work is really meaningful and valuable. And we've kind of all felt that, like we're doing something that feels really important to us. And just all of that entails kind of that, there's sort of that sense of fulfillment that we get with that. So when I went to grad school, I was inspired by an experiment by Adam Grant, who's sort of a famous IO psychologist. And so he did this experiment on task significance. So it was with university fundraisers. Basically had two conditions. One condition, they had people come into the fundraisers and provide stories from people who had benefited from the scholarships that they were raising money for. And another condition where callers, who were callers in their previous jobs, talked about how being a fundraising caller benefited their career personally. So it was sort of a personal condition versus an other-oriented pro-social condition. And, over the course of the study, there were double the amount of pledges for the pro-social group, double the amount of money raised. So really, there was a dramatic effect. And the idea here is that you're sort of connecting to the beneficiaries of your work, which is triggering that task significance. And so Adam Grant sort of talked in passing that sort of an intervening factor here is meaningfulness. Like, it's not just the task significance. It's that felt experience of meaningfulness that really drives you to higher performance. Like, okay, this really matters, so I'm going to work hard at it.
As a vocational psychologist, Dr. Allan was specifically interested in meaningfulness and its relationship to individuals. So he took what Adam Grant had done, but he made meaningfulness the outcome. In his first experiment, he brought people in the lab and created 3 conditions, which he refers to as a personal condition, a pro-social condition, and a task significance condition.
So what we had to do for this experiment was think of a task that is totally meaningless in and of itself, like it has no meaning, so that we could imbue it with some sense of meaningfulness in the lab.
What he and his team did was have participants type the letters XZ as many times as they could in 5 minutes. At the end of the 5 minutes, Dr. Allan's team would total up the number of XZs, and the more pairs of letters participants typed, the more money they made.
So in essence, there's a meaning of making money, like our jobs make money. And so you can have a job that for you is inherently meaningless, but you make some money, and that gives some sense of, okay, this is important. So we gave a personal condition where they just kept the money, and it was like $5. I mean, like a Starbucks coffee, basically. And the next condition was the pro-social condition. And so we said, okay, you're going to earn this money, and we're going to donate it sort of on your behalf to the American Red Cross. Okay, that's fine. Then we had the task significance condition, and the idea was that we were going to connect them with the beneficiary in some way. And so what we did is we played this video that we found of this big cowboy, this like huge, I don't even know, 250-pound cowboy with big cowboy hat, talking about how his house burned down and the American Red Cross came and helped him. And one sentence was that, someone handed him a toothbrush and he just started crying. And he's like, how much a toothbrush meant to me in that moment. And then, of course, at the end of the video, we said, all right, we're donating this money to the American Red Cross.
So participants were asked to come into a lab to do an extremely boring task. The personal condition group was shown the video of the cowboy, but all references to the Red Cross were cut out. Then they were told that the more XZ pairs they typed, the more money they would earn and keep. The pro-social condition group was shown the same video as the personal condition group. They were told the money they earned would be given to the Red Cross. The task significant condition group was shown this video too, but in their version of the video, they learned that it was the Red Cross who provided that toothbrush and relief to that man. Participants in this group were then told that the money they earned would be donated to the Red Cross to help more people like him.
And as you would expect, we found, very consistent increases in how much they rated that the task was meaningful. We just asked them, hey, was that meaningful what you did? And of course, the lowest condition by far was the personal condition, and then the pro-social condition was higher, and then the task significance condition was the highest. So the idea behind this experiment is, that we develop a sense of meaningfulness in our work when we A, know that it's benefiting other people, and B, that we actually can see that it's benefiting other people. It's one thing to know it in your thoughts intellectually, and it's another thing to really experience, oh my goodness, I'm really helping this person.
Remember the bricklayer's parable? That first bricklayer, the one simply doing his job for the paycheck, illustrates the personal condition. He's focused on himself and the short term, and there's nothing wrong with that. The bricklayer working to support his family illustrates the pro-social condition. Like the first bricklayer, he's focused on the short term, but he's working to serve others beyond himself. That third bricklayer, the one who sees his work as serving a higher purpose, illustrates the task significance condition. Sure, he's doing the work to earn a living in the short run, but he sees himself and his work within a larger, longer-term legacy, one that will outlive himself and his kids and generations beyond them. So we must connect the dots from the task we're doing right here, right now, to its downstream benefit to others. And we must make this connection in a way we and our team can see it. But how? And how can we do it at scale? How can we do that when our employees are spread around the world between office buildings and home offices? We'll launch into this after the break. This program is made possible by Jackson Healthcare, a family of highly specialized staffing, search, and technology companies. Headquartered in Metro Atlanta, we're powered by more than 2,600 associates and over 20,000 clinician providers covering all 50 U.S. states. Recognized year after year as a great place to work, our mission is to improve the delivery of patient care and the lives of everyone we touch. We're always looking for bright professionals who have a drive to serve others, grow professionally, and do the wise thing. If that's you, check us out at jacksonhealthcare.com. So how can we see how our collective work benefits others when many of us are separated from our colleagues as well as our clients? I believe the answer is that we can achieve this through narrative. Now, you may be thinking, doesn't he mean storytelling? No, there's a difference between narrative and storytelling. In episode 1, I used whiskey and bourbon as a metaphor to help distinguish between generosity and giving back. Whiskey is a category of which bourbon is a part of. And likewise, generosity is a category of which giving back is a part of, in addition to acts of kindness, advocacy, and self-sacrifice. The same relationship exists between narrative and story. All stories are narratives, but not all narratives are stories. Let me explain. A story is something that happened in the past. It has a beginning and ending. A narrative is something that happened in the past, is happening now in the present, or can happen in the future. And since it's still happening, it doesn't have an ending. Me telling you about what I did yesterday is a story. Me sharing my dreams for tomorrow is a narrative. You consume a story, but you co-create a narrative. You can influence its direction and outcome. The key to meaningful work is seeing how even the boring, everyday tasks we do ultimately serve and benefit others. Since many of us don't interact face to face with the clients and community organizations we serve, narrative is key to helping us see task significance of our work. Here's an explanation I hope helps. Today, when we tell about the first moon landing that took place in July 1969, it's a story. It's a story because the Apollo space program has a beginning and ending. However, when President John F. Kennedy stood before Congress 8 years earlier in May of 1961 to propose that the U.S. should commit to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely home before the end of the decade, he was creating a narrative, not a story. It was a narrative because it was just the beginning. Dr. Allan shared a story of how President Kennedy used narrative and task significance to activate support.
So Andrew Carton, who's a faculty member at Wharton, I believe, did a really great, I think it was his dissertation and published study on JFK and the moon landing and how JFK kind of made that meaningful for the people working towards that project. And so there's a famous sort of story, apocryphal story, who knows if it's true, but apparently JFK went up to a custodian who was sweeping the floors in, some building associated with the moon landing. And JFK said, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, sir, I'm putting a man on the moon. It was sort of, I'm not sweeping floors. I'm putting a man on the moon. So that's sort of that connection. And so how, Carton studied all these videos and all the sort of data around that time period and found that JFK kind of went through these very specific steps. And, the first step was creating this, what he called an ultimate aspiration, but it's just sort of what's the mission of what you're all doing? What's the mission of the company, the fundamental mission? And so that's not enough, I don't think, in and of itself, unless an individual employee has a very, particular connection to that. Then what JFK did is he translated this into a concrete objective. And then he communicated all of these very specific steps that they had to take in order to accomplish that concrete objective. And in doing that, connected all of these steps to people's individual tasks that they were doing each day. So it's sort of really laying it out for people like, okay, here's what I'm doing. Here's exactly how I fit in the process. Here's the process. Here's the goal of the process. And here's the ultimate aspiration of the process that we're working toward.
Did you catch it? That story of the custodian putting a man on the moon by sweeping floors is a modern retelling of the bricklayer building a cathedral for the Almighty. Great narratives never die. In this episode, we've learned that narrative is the engine that activates task-significant conditions with the work task we do. Stories, then, can be used to reinforce progress by sharing achievements along the way. Purpose isn't something you must go out there and find. There is no ideal job that will imbue your life with purpose and meaning. Purpose is something you inject into the work you do. The word purpose comes from the root words meaning to put forth or to put in place. It's a word that carries the meanings of an intention, an aim, or a goal. For our generosity efforts to be meaningful, they need to connect the things we must do today with our ultimate aspiration. And that ultimate aspiration must exist as a narrative that invites us and others to work together toward a better tomorrow. We started this episode with the question, could any job or task be made to be meaningful? Based upon the research by Dr. Allan and others, the answer is a clear yes. What's even more important is that we've learned that our sense of meaningfulness is directly tied to how the work we do benefits others. That's our spirit of generosity at work. Generosity isn't merely the things we do for others and ourselves in the here and now. Generosity is something we can give future generations through innovations, inventions, and even ultimate aspirations in the forms of narratives. It can be a legacy we leave for others, like Dr. King's promised land of justice and equality for all. I want to invite you into the bigger narrative of generosity at work. Imagine a world in which most business leaders and organizations are generous in responsible, consistent, and purposeful ways. I want to live and work in that world. In the next episode, we're going to shift away from the what, how, and why of generosity toward where we should focus our generosity efforts. Until then, the question I want you thinking about is this: what is the bigger narrative you and your business are serving? Generosity at Work is produced by Jackson Healthcare's Love Lifts Community Impact Platform. This is a free resource for professionals seeking to go beyond profit and be a force for good in their communities. Learn more about Jackson Healthcare and its community impact work at jacksonhealthcare.com.